I'm Dane Rose and wanted to introduce this project and a little bit about what's behind it. The first thing that I've noticed throughout my life is that people tend to connect in niches, and I would call them 20% niches. So I might have relationships with 20 people, in my life at a given point, but it would be unusual for any one of those people to bridge more than 20%. A significant other might connect with 40% of what's actually going on inside my mind. And what I also noticed was that there was not only an ignorance about the other 60 to 80% in general, there was an ignorance about the ignorance, because I tend to connect more deeply one-on-one. And, a lot of different areas in life go in different, have different emphases. I might be interested in a business venture over here, a design venture over here, a nonprofit venture over here, and a romantic interest over here. And they don't connect in the individual relationships in kind of a broad spectrum image. However, what's more interesting to me is that there is an innate sense of connection and flow that I'm aware of. I'm aware of the fact that as I develop an innovation in my business, I might take it over to a book about relationships, then take it into a personal relationship, then iterate it there, and then bring it back to the business. I might see certain patterns. The other thing that's kind of important to understand in any stable entity, including a human psyche, an individual, is this principle of balance. And the best way to look at that is to think of how nature grows a tree. If nature grows all the branches on one side of the tree, then, and all the roots on one side of the tree, then it's going to blow over in that direction. And there's an intuitive sense of balance in each of our lives. And what I find is that as I veer off hard to the right in this area, I feel off balance. I feel off center. And so I counter it by veering off to the left in another direction. And much like building a skyscraper, if you want to build something solid, the building process has to be somewhat symmetrical. So I might build 10% over here, and then build 20% over here, and then build 50% over here, come back, build another 20% in this area, so that at any given point I'm not getting lopsided. And this seemed to be the most, I guess, suggestive or meaningful narrative in understanding an individual, and by extension understanding the species as a whole. If we understand the fractal nature of reality, then we see that the human cell is to the human body what the human ego is to the human culture, what the individual is to the family, to the community, to the species. And so I don't tend to look at any of these individual projects as being terribly interesting just because they're about me. But rather, I infer a lot when I get to know some area within myself that helps me understand other people, which makes understanding self a bridge to understanding others. So the final thing I would say is that within a chauvinistic culture in which masculine energy, getting to the point, the individual, accomplishment, finding one's personal mission, etc., all of this point type focus which is the masculine expression, in contrast with the circle. The individual is a lot about the point. The circle is a lot about the pattern. And so within a chauvinistic culture, we tend to connect on point. Oh, I have a dog, you have a dog, let's connect around that point. I voted for this president, you voted for the same president. Let's connect around the point. But one of the things that we often miss in this more zoomed in and myopic approach to relating is connecting in broader patterns. And these patterns are very rarely displayed because we have different segments for our lives. But the feminine principle is not so much to look at any one thing, but rather to look at its composition, to look at the pattern as a whole. And what that brings in is the science of pattern organization as opposed to the science of specialization. Another expression of chauvinism tends to be language over imagery. And so to bring in a little bit of the typical stereotype of the left brain, right brain balance by paying attention to the visual landscape, which is often how I relate to things, meaning I generally get little snapshots of half-second montages in, I'll dumb them down to call them geometric shapes, but constellation of images that reveal a pattern. And when I see images that have 30 or 40 kind of vector points all coalescing around a very particular pattern, I know that it's a significant pattern, and so I spend time to explore it. But it's not the individual things that, any one of those vector points that are that interesting. It's rather the phenomena of 30 or 40 things coming together and all constellating around a particular object that I, pay attention to. And as I unpack an image and put it into long language, meaning you have this gestalt of images exploding into awareness, the quick analysis of all the different vectors and patterns that are coming together around a particular nub or constellation of images, the acknowledgement that it's significant, that all happens in 1 to 2 seconds, maybe a minute at the most. It then takes, many hours to unpack that into lineal language. But because I relate to things as an image initially, I wanted to kind of portray this landscape with a little bit more of a sense of space. So enjoy the human brain as constellated through my psyche.